All right. Hi, y'all. Welcome to another season. So I went ahead and kept my promise, right? Which I know is going to be so fucking shocking to a lot of you out there who've been following me since the beginning. Unfortunately, I'm inconsistent on here and I apologize. As I always say, I'm going to do my best to work on it, right? That's what life's all about, just learning and growing, right? So, okay. So this season, I want to focus on why the fuck do we do the things that we do, right? Okay, so I mentioned it at the end of last season, which was yesterday, which was kind of awesome. So, I held to that promise, right? The 13th and the 14th of August. So what I mentioned yesterday is true, right? So I'm in college, so it's a little bit of a struggle with stress and time because there's only so many fucking hours of the day, but I am glad that I'm doing it, right? So at this point in my life, I'm going to be 51 in November, and I am more than halfway done with my bachelor's degree, and that is not something I ever thought that I would do. So to me, that's pretty awesome. I'm really fucking proud of myself, if I do say so myself. Okay, so in the interest of trying to be more smarter, more intelligent, more well-read, more articulate, I started thinking about, so I've been on 0 to 70 days, right? So up until this point, right? So quick update, right? So my third husband of 12 years ended our relationship, and I didn't see it coming, and it devastated me. I cried like legit every day for like 6 months. Like I didn't see it coming. So it was a huge surprise. It was a huge shock. I was extremely happy until that moment. So it took some time, right? So about 6 months passed, me literally crying every day on my pillow, and a friend of mine flew in, put me on my first dating app, and the podcast was born, right? So I decided to turn my life into something positive, right? Because I was like really sad. I love to laugh anyway throughout my day. I'm often known as kind of like a court gesture to my friends and family in a great way, right? So I was like, I'm going to do a podcast. A few of you had mentioned a book. I can't do that. I'm not smart enough for that, but I can do a podcast. Okay. So in the interest of all that, right? And then of course I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm here. If they're sad, veteran or not, if you need somebody to talk to in the middle of the night, I'm fucking here, right? Okay. So this season, obviously I've had some failures, right? In my relationship life. I mean, there's been some positives. Like my third ex-husband, I don't regret that. It was a good 12 years. Unfortunately it didn't work out, right? My previous two husbands, all three great men, but it just didn't work out, right? So some of it I think is timing, and some of it I think is just not the right person at the right timing, or just not the right person, or maybe you're seeing what you want to see. So my whole thing is kind of like, why am I making these choices, right? So I've been on 0 to 70, right? So does that mean that I'm like a terrible person? And, I think I'm adorable and funny and sweet and loyal and honest and so on. But maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm an asshole in some way, right? So I started thinking for this next season, because I knew the last one was going to end, unfortunately, because my relationship ended, right? So I was like, this season, I want to talk about why do I do the things I do? Why do we do the things we do, right? So there's a few studies. There's a professor that I'll go into more detail about, who has been conducting studies and research, mostly with college students, but I think it's fascinating, right? So her whole thing is like, there's like different things that we look for when we meet somebody, right? What, of course, the relationship status, right? Which I love talking about. So there's physical attractiveness, which I mentioned yesterday, proximity, similarity, reciprocity, which I have such a hard time still fucking saying, and familiarity, right? So those are the things that I'm going to dive a little bit more into each episode of this season, because I find it fucking fascinating, right? And of course, I want your feedback on social media or any platform you find me on. Okay, so physical attractiveness, right? So I mentioned it yesterday, and I think it's fascinating because it's like, what's physically attractive to you, right? So to me, like I love beards, I love tattoos, I love men who work out, like I love like strong, muscular bodies, right? I love biceps, I love quads, in men specifically, right? So those are traits that I find physically attractive. Those are things that you may not find attractive, but it's interesting to figure out where those attractions came from. Like why? Is it social media? Is it just me walking around the street? Is it because I like to work out? Like, and I see these men in the gym. Is it like the soldier, like soft guy, because most soft guys have beards, tattoos, a whole bit. Like, where does it come from, right? So I find that interesting. So I'm going to do some thinking about it this week, and then let you guys know what I have come to the conclusion with my own physical attractiveness. Like why? I suspect I know where the beard came from, right? But I want to know, like, what you guys think, right? I have also come to the conclusion, I realized this with CG, every man that I have been in a relationship with, not that there have been that many, but every man that, like actual relationships, they've all had blue eyes, right? So I find that pretty fascinating because there's something about that, obviously, for me that I find physically attractive. They're either Irish or Scottish or brought up in those homes, so I find that interesting. But once again, physical attractiveness, I'm going to do my own self-homework this week and report back to you guys next weekend of what I have discovered about myself. Please do the same because I think it will be interesting for you and your friends and family. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to start to talk about this season was social media. Okay, so I joined social media right after my basic training. I graduated in the 4th of July weekend of 2009, right? So a lot of my friends, of course, were younger than me because, I joined the Army at 35. And at that point, the age had gone up to 42, but almost everybody in my class was significantly younger than me, right? The average age is like 18 to 23 in basic training. So, good or bad, right? I've always fit in with younger generations. That's probably a bad thing on my part, to be honest. But anyway, so my newfound lifelong friends at that point were like, oh, you got to get on Facebook. You got to get on social media so that way we can stay in touch. Because, it's the Army. We're all going to be traveling. I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. I've never done it. Obviously, I'm older. I graduated from high school in 1990. I got my first cell phone when I was working for Target, and I thought they were really cool people. I didn't realize that meant I had to be at work all the time. But that's a whole other story, right? So, anyway, so I went ahead and joined social media in August 2009, and I have, of course, I'm older, but Facebook is my favorite, right? So, I shouldn't say that. Instagram is probably my favorite, but I'm on Facebook quite a bit because it's easier to interact, but Instagram is easier for fun, I guess I could say, more like less drama-free things. Anyway, so those are my two favorites, right? Okay, so let's say that. I have two favorites. Okay, so the thing about Facebook through the years, right? Because I joined in 2009, right? So it's now 2022. The thing about it is it has become like a huge part in all of our lives, right? We do like a lot of shopping with Facebook. There's like Facebook Marketplace. We buy and sell items. We, keep connected with people that are in different countries, different time zones. It's pretty awesome if you think about it, right? Revolutions have been incited on social media. Riots have unfortunately been incited on social media. But I did actually a paper on this recently for my last writing class, and I found it fascinating. There's a lot of censorship in social media that I find fascinating as well. Like I've been banned quite a bit because, everybody knows my sense of humor. I love to joke and talk about dick, so I've been banned a lot, right? So it's interesting because I do think that social media needs some regulation, but I think we need to regulate it. I don't think it needs to be Zuckerberg or some other entity. I think for the most part, as American citizens, I think we should be able to monitor ourselves. That's just my personal belief. But okay, so the thing about social media, right, is it's grown and changed, it's evolved, right? So there's so many pros to it. I think there's very few cons, right? So I talked about riots, right? There's a lot of hate speech. There's a lot of like bullying. There's a lot of just terrible things that happen, right? With trafficking and all sorts of things that are horrific. But there are more, in my opinion, more pros and positives about social media. So at this point in time, approaching the end of 2022, most of us are on social media to some extent, right? I love to laugh all day. Like you guys know, you guys help me get through my stressful days with just memes and jokes and talking shit. And it's so much fun to me and I appreciate it, right? I scaled down my social media. So when I started in 2009, I was single. My ex-husband and I had been chatting, kind of dating, but we weren't married at this point, right? So I eventually got out of training, moved to Houston, and we moved in together, and then we eventually got married. So that was successful. But my whole point is, like, social media was so new at that point, and he was 10 and a half years younger than me, by the way. And so he had a slightly different take on social media. But the thing that I found interesting in our relationship, our marriage, is so as I said, I joined in August 2009. He and I met before that in 2008. We were kind of dating kind of thing, what have you. I went through like all of my training, basic training, AIT, came home. I was living in San Antonio. I was living in Houston. We did like a long distance thing for a bit. It was like 4 hours drive. I would see him every weekend. He would see me every weekend. It was awesome. And then one day when I was working out at the gym, I remember this vividly. I was doing a cable lat down pull, which is my favorite fucking exercises ever. I don't know. I just fucking love cable lat down pull. I don't know why. Anyway, so I was doing that, and it occurred to me because he and I were texting and chatting. I was just like, he's the one. Like, I'm not interested in anybody else. He may not be perfect for other people on paper, but for me, this motherfucker is perfect for me, right? He's done things, said things, proven his, commitment, love to me. He wrote me like letters every fucking day in basic training, old school pen and paper, really fucking cute, right? So I was like, he used to send me comic strips. He called it a report with his last name. I'm not going to say it, but well, fuck it. Anyway, I was going to say you already know my name, but fuck it. Anyway, so so doing cable lat down pull, listening to probably fucking Pitbull or somebody in my ear at that point who I was obsessed with. Still kind of cool, by the way, to work out. Anyway, I finished my set, grabbed my phone, and I think it was like an iPhone 3 or some shit. And I was just kind of like, hey, so what do you think if I moved to your city? And we started this whole conversation. We moved in together. So the reason I bring this up is because at that point in time, I was a full-time personal trainer, right? So I joined the Army because I wanted to supplement my income, found out I could. I was older, in great shape, it was awesome. So once basic training was over, I was a reservist, so I went right back to the same gym. So I went back to being a personal trainer with a little bit of extra income, right? So the reason I bring this up is because doing my exercise, texted him, this is what I want to do. It was awesome. I was on social media, but I wasn't sharing as much as I do now later on in my life. So at that point, I was like, this is cool. I'm a trainer. I'm working out. I'm doing CrossFit, before and after, Army training. And it just kind of evolved into a fun thing, right? So my ex-husband is much more private on social media, though I think lately he's much more open than he used to be, which is awesome for him, but whatever. So anyway, so we decided, to move in together. And at that point in time, we were friends on Facebook, of course, right? Because, we met, dated, whatever. He helped me through basic training, all that kind of shit. But we didn't do like an update status. Like I had posted a couple photos of him. Remember, this is 2009 too. So they're like these horribly pixelated fucking photos because everybody's phone cameras look like shit. But there's all these photos, right? Slightly blurry. I'm like us, like with our selfies, like awesome. And I'm like a huge PDA fan. And so I was always kissing, hugging him, bragging about how cute he was. But he hadn't really at this point done the same. He hadn't reciprocated, right? One of the things I wanted to talk about this season, he hadn't really reciprocated that, right? But I was okay with it because the real life, like the IRL in real life was fucking awesome. So I was like, social media, whatever. At that point, I wasn't heavily invested, right? So we're talking to our friends and family. We had all met everybody, right? Everybody's friends and family had already met at this point. We moved in together. We picked an apartment. It was really cute. And literally the night that we moved in and like we dumped all of our shit and we're like, we'll unpack later. We went to go see a movie and Paranormal Activity. It was awesome. And then we came home. We went to like bed for the first time. He had a bunch of shit on his nightstand. I had shit on my nightstand. We dumped our shit. And then he was like, by the way, I want to tell you something. He was like, have you been on Facebook? And I was like, no. And he was like, take a look. So I looked, and for him, this was like a huge fucking gesture because he was not pretending that I didn't exist, but he wasn't open or public, right? So all these fucking years later, I remember it because for him, for this man, him being public on social media was huge. It was like the biggest fucking grandest romantic gesture he could do, right? It was awesome as shit. So I opened it, I clicked on, he had requested me to be in a relationship with him. Also, he had created an album of all the photos and selfies that we had had up until that point to include our dog and Sweet Pea at the time. Oh, it's just a cute shit. Anyway, it was awesome. And it was an amazing moment on social media. And it was a huge gesture on his part, right? So throughout our marriage, we were on Facebook, we would laugh, we would talk about each other, we'd share videos, selfies, memes weren't as heavy, but we would still talk about memes, and we had a good social media, healthy relationship, I think, right? So over time, I accumulated 5,000 friends because of CrossFit, and that was just a fun hobby for me. And over time, he realized that he wanted a smaller life, and he would mention that occasionally, and he was just like, I just don't want to have everything broadcasted. So I was like, I get that. Obviously, we're married, we're a couple, so I compromised, and I started sharing less and less, and I was less myself, right? So, and of course, that has all fucking changed. I'm 100% my fucking self at this point on social media. So anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because social media has just evolved. It's something in our life that's not going away, right? I think it's fascinating. We can all participate. We can all talk to like our government officials. Like it's fucking awesome, right? We can, as I said, we can like revolutions can fucking happen. It's fucking awesome. It's exciting. I think it's something that we should embrace. I think censorship is something that we need to do ourselves, but I do think it's interesting to talk about. So the only other thing I really wanted to talk about was social media and relationships, status, statuses is basically that's one of those things that has evolved, right? Like I told you, CG and I never really had a chance to talk about it because we broke up, but I felt that him hearting single females in his state, their profile pictures and some of their names, I thought the simple emoji heart for me felt disrespectful because we were in a committed relationship, right? We never really had a chance to discuss that, but it's one of those things that I went to work immediately, asked, my sounding boards and male recruiters, and they're like, we're with you. He's in a committed relationship. He shouldn't be doing that. Talk about it. Well, unfortunately, we broke up, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it. But for me, it felt disrespectful, right? So it's one of those things that I think social media is kind of like a precursor to life, right? Unfortunately, on social media, the only thing you ever see are highlights, and that frustrates me a little bit. Recently, I've been trying to share things that are not as fun. Like I had the break-in, right? So the reason I wanted to show the break-in was because that's a part of my life that's real, right? Like I love to laugh. I love to joke. Obviously, I love to joke about dick to make everybody laugh. It's the easiest fucking joke out there. But, and I feel like we should disclose more of our lives that are not the amazing highlight social reels. Like my ex and I, a few of our mutual friends used to tease me, my ex-husband and I rather, because I was always posting photos and like poems and song lyrics to him, and he would write these cute little notes and I would take photos and I was like, oh, look how cute, this is what he did, this was in my drawer, whatever, when I woke up. So I used to like always talk about the positives, but I never talk about the negatives we have. Our marriage was successful, but it was not perfect because no one's marriage or relationship is perfect. But unfortunately, at that point, without realizing it, I was focusing so much in our marriage on social media with the highlight reels that I think, unfortunately, at least for he and I, it made him uncomfortable after a while because he was like, our life's good, but it's not that fucking good, right? And then he was like, I'm tired of taking selfies. And it could have been he and I specifically, but I do think it's interesting because I think relationships evolve, and relationships are different for each person, right? We were together for 12 years. So we were definitely not the same people we were when we met. 12 years later, we had changed, right? Social media kind of came along for the ride, right? So it's interesting because, we did the profile pics together as a couple. And I find profile pics as a couple fascinating because I did them with CG and we had quite a few of them. We didn't have as many as I wanted, as I said yesterday, but we had a few that I loved. And I loved the profile picture because I'm on social media a lot. So for me to click on Facebook, the first thing I saw, of course, is your name, right? When it pops up and then your page. But I loved it because I saw his face like immediately the first time I logged on, and it made me happy, made me smile. So profile pictures as a couple for me make me happy. They make me smile. I miss it. But that doesn't mean though that just because you're in a relationship and you're on Facebook or Instagram and you're at a couple selfie profile photo, it doesn't mean that person is loyal or honest, and cannot be interpreted to me as disrespectful, right? Just with the hearts and all that kind of stuff. But it's definitely, it's interesting. And then I know couples who do the profile photo thing, and then they every once in a while will do like a collage of photos or videos or memories, and they'll be like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I'm married to so-and-so. I'm so happy that so-and-so is my girlfriend, my boyfriend, whatever. And it's awesome, but it also makes me wonder, like, did they just have a fight, right? Like if you see the guy at the grocery store with the flowers, you're just like, is he really sweet and romantic? Or is it a first date and he's trying to get fucking laid? Or is he in trouble and he's trying to get out of trouble? It's the same thing when I see stuff like that on social media. It doesn't mean that every time I used to brag about my ex-husband, we had gotten in a fight by any means. We like hardly ever fought throughout the whole fucking 12 years. It's kind of cool. But it wasn't that. It was just that's how my feelings were. That's how my emotions were. So I don't think that there's a right or wrong with social media, whether you're single or you're in a couple status of some kind, married, engaged, whatever, girlfriend, boyfriend. But I think it's interesting to talk about it with your significant other, right? Like I'm a huge PDA fan. Like I didn't get as crazy with CG, but I did like post on his wall often like memes, and I would comment and say that I love you. I hope you know me, like how much I love you kind of thing. And he did it back. I wish he had done it more, but that's just my relationship style. That's my love language, basically, right? Anyway, so if you guys have any questions about anything at any point, whether it's any of these traits, from the psychologist, of trying to help us figure out why we do what the fuck we do. If you have any comments or questions about social media as a couple, whether you agree with everything I'm saying, whether you think I'm full of shit, I mean, obviously let me know. And I will do my best to get back to you next weekend. I will do my best after I do my own homework of why I'm attracted to the physical attractive traits that I am attracted to. All right, guys. So if you have any questions, if you need me for anything, you know where to find me. And love you. And